He's already muted us. Can you hear him?
Please join me in Gasho. Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to those who are here today, as well as those joining us on Zoom. Welcome to our regular Sunday service for the last service in June. Hard to believe, half a year's gone by now. We'll be getting to July next week. And I'd like to begin this morning's service with a moment of silent meditation, followed by the recitation of the name of the Buddha or the Nembutsu. Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman Nobs, Naman. Okay, next we will have the reading of our pledge, and I'm bringing it up on the screen here. For those of you here, you'll have to take a look at the screen. Our pledge was written by our President Gomonshi-sama as a sort of updated version of the Shinshu pledge. So we'll read this one together. Our pledge. Breaking out of my shell, I shall carefully share a warm smile and speak gentle words, just like the kind Buddha. Not becoming lost in my greed, anger, and ignorance, I shall be open-minded and act accordingly, just like the calm and peaceful Buddha. Not putting myself first, I shall share in the joy and sadness of others, just like the compassionate Buddha. Realizing the gift of life we have received, I shall live each day to its fullest, like the Buddha who continues to emancipate all. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Next, we'll have the recitation of Bandhana Tisarana. For those of you who have this purple Seiken, it's on 325, or it's on the screen here. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Nam Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Homage to him, the exalted one, the enlightened one, the supremely awakened one. Buddha Sarana Gacchami. I go to the Buddha for guidance. Dhamma Sarana Gacchami. I go to the Dharma for guidance. Sangha Sarana Gacchami. I go to the Sangha for guidance. No one knows. Next, we will be chanting the English version of the Shoshinge, the hymn of true and trusting in the Nembutsu. In the red Seiken, it's on page 106. Mary, did you get the red Seiken? For those of you who are joining by Zoom, I think I sent the wrong version of it yesterday in my attachment, but you can see it on the screen. So we'll be chanting the hymns of true and trusting in the Nembutsu. No mandops, no mandops, no mandops, no mandops. No mandops. In trust in the working of limitless life, bow to the light that surpasses all thought. Bodhisattva Dharma Kada in his seeking stage, Sadokesvara Raja at his Buddha seat. He learned the causes and conditions of each Buddha land, studied the inhabitants and all their qualities. On this foundation he brought forth supreme aspiration, awakening the great vow all embracing, vast and rare, through ages of reflection, determining his vow. He reaffirmed his calling name would be heard everywhere. Thus he radiates his light, immeasurable and boundless, unhindered beyond compare, a dazzling, glorious blaze, light that purifies the mind, light of joy and wisdom, light unceasing beyond thought, far beyond description, brighter than the sun and moon, illuminating countless worlds. Every being, everyone receives this radiant light. The calling name of the primal vow properly directs us. The vow of sincere and trusting mind becomes for us the cause. Equal awakening is attained, confirming great nirvana, because of the vast fulfillment. Nirvana is surely attained. The reason that Tathagata came forth into our world was to teach Amida's primal vow, boundless as the ocean. That means also boundless in the evil, impure age, should respond in trust and take to heart Tathagata's true words. If for the briefest moment the mind of joy awakes, we realize nirvana, though our minds remain defiled. Worldly wise dharma haters all will turn and enter, as rivers pour into the sea, becoming of one taste. The all-embracing mind light always shines on and protects us. The darkness of our ignorance already has dispersed, yet craving, anger, greed, and hatred, like dark clouds and mist, always cover up the sky of true insight and faith. As obscure the sun, covering its light, yet beneath them pure light radiates. No darkness can be found. receiving faith with reverence, discernment, and great joy. Without delay, we leap across beyond the evil realms. When ordinary beings, whether full of good or evil, hear and trust the Tathagata's all-embracing vow. Shakyamuni calls them all superior, clear-sighted. Such people are correctly named white lotus flowers. Amida Buddha's primal vow established Nembutsu. Yet we have cling to evil views with arrogance and pride, can never easily receive the truth with joyful faith. There is nothing that could be more difficult than this. The masters of the teachings from India in the West, and all the noble monks who lived in China and Japan, explain to us the great sage came with a true intention to clarify the primal vow accords with everyone. Shakyamuni Buddha dwelling among the to the multitudes foretold one day in India south. Mahasattva Nagarjuna will appear in this world and destroy dualistic views of being and non-being, transmitting Mahayana, the Dharma unsurpassed. He will realize the stage of joy, be born in the land of peace, and teach that arduous practice is like struggling down an endless road, while joyful trust in the easy way is a peaceful voyage at sea. With mindful recollection of Amida's primal vow, without design instantly we reach a certain stage, and with the soul eternal praising of Tathagata's name, let us repay the kindness of the great compassionate vow. Bodhisattva Vasubandhu in his discourse stated that he had surrendered to unhindered life, relying on the larger sutra. He revealed true virtue, made known that with the great vow We leap over birth and death through the power of the primal vow, transferring us its virtue. He revealed the single mind, delivering all beings, entering the all-pervading precious sea of merit. We surely will be numbered with the great assembly. Allah to reach the lotus world, we realize true suchness. True Dharma nature is attained clearly without doubt. We play in the forest of passions, yet manifest wonderful powers. We enter birth and death's garden, transform to benefit all. The king of Liang in ancient China, revered Master Tanwan, and daily bow toward his teacher, a bodhisattva in his eyes. When Master Bodhidharma gave Tanwana Pure Land text, he burned his Taoist books and placed his trust in the land of peace. He wrote a commentary on Vasubandhu's discourse, reveal cause and effect of birth, both come from the vow. We depart and we return because of other power. Only through the mind of faith is Buddhahood assured. When the mind of faith awakes in ordinary beings, we are made aware that birth and death is nothing but nirvana. And when unfailingly we reach the limitless and radiant light, we will say the myriad of beings everywhere. Tao Cho discerned on the noble path, attainment is hard to confirm, and clarified the Pure Land as the sole way to break through. Criticize self-practice, practice of the myriad good works, then urge us only to recite the perfectly virtuous name. He kindly taught us base aspects, pure mind, single and constant. Guide us as the Dharma declines toward our form and extinction, making the all-embracing vow, though doing evil all our lives, we reach a world of nurturing peace. Realize the fruit of enlightenment. Shantao alone shone light upon the Buddha's true intent, empathizing with those who practice good and with the rebellious and evil. He made it clear that the radiant name is the cause and condition for birth, clearing the way for all to enter the gracia wisdom, the primal vow. We then receive the diamond mind, one and indestructible, through one moment of joyful thought, in oneness with Amida. With Vaidehi we acquire faith and joy and wisdom, awaken to the way things are eternal and at peace. Genshin studied fully every teaching of the Buddha, chose refuge in the peaceful realm, imploring all to follow, divided deep and single path from shallow sundry practice, distinguished birth in the true pure land from provisional attainments. He taught that even evil ones should simply say the Buddha's name. I too, he said, am fully in Tathagata's embrace. Though my defiled and anxious mind prevents me from perceiving it, the light of great compassion shines upon me ceaselessly. Our own master owned and understood the Buddha's teachings with compassion for all ordinary beings, good or bad. He caused a true essential way to flourish in these islands, proclaim the selected primal vow throughout this evil world. Returning to samsara's house, the wheel of birth and death, results when doubt and lack of trust becomes a mind of foundation. But when the mind of faith awakes, we are quickly made to enter the home of pure tranquility, transcending all conditions. The Mahasattvas and masters teaching the sutras have saved countless beings so defiled and corrupt. Now in our own time, both lay people and monks, let us trust with one heart what our noble masters have taught. The virtue of Amita's vow is shared equally by all, together attaining awakened mind. We are born in the land of peace. Namandavs, 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 namandavs. Namandavs. So once again, good morning, everyone. We have a treat today. Today, we're going to have Roy Sensei give us our Dharma talk. So Roy Sensei, I can ask you, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this morning's service. And it's been quite a while since I've been able to stand and give a talk on what I consider to be important issues of Buddhism. And what I've done is I've chosen the topic, the Tanisho. And what I'd like to do is to give you my view of the Tanisho. And perhaps for some of you, it may be repetitious because you've read it several times. And for some of you, it may be a first time. But let us see what happens. If we can put our hands together, let us listen to the words of Yuan in the Tanisho. And this is what he has said. When true, entrusting, firm as a diamond, is settled at that very instant, Amida's light grasps us and protects us, and we forever transcend birth and death. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. So as many of you are aware, the Tanisho is a written version of the comments or the doctrine by Shinran. And I've made reference to a couple of, maybe 3 texts. And the texts, which perhaps you may be able to see online, I'm not sure. But the one here is the one that's most familiar, and that is called Tanisho, a Shin Buddhist classic, translated by Dr. Taitetsu Uno. Now, this version is available on Google. And if you wish to go to it, you'll find this rendition as written in this book. The other one is written by, translation by Dr. or Professor Ryukyo Fujimoto. And it's not that well circulated, you might say. But it is a translation according to Dr. Fujimoto. And the other one, although it's not a true translation, it's a commentary on the Tanisho, and it's called Hearing the Buddha's Call, The Life, Works, and Words of Shinran by Jitsuen Kakihashu. Kakehashi Sensei is a renowned scholar and lecturer in Honganji, and I think that he received the status of Kangaku at one time, and his work is very simple and easy to understand. And he doesn't make a direct translation, but he makes comments. What I'd like to do is to perhaps summarize what these 3 people have said. But before we do that, let us remember that the Tanisho is made up of 3 parts. The first part is really the comments made by Shinran, and it's recorded by Yuan. They say maybe decades after the passing of Shinran. The second part is a commentary on questions raised by some of the people that listened and heard the comments by Shinran. And so Yuan is trying to interpret that and reply to those questions. And the third part would be it's called the epilogue, where he makes comments in a general framework. And in this case here, I followed the comments made by Dr. Taitetsu Uno. And before you do go into this, perhaps a brief understanding of Shinran's life would help. As we all know, that at the age of 9, he entered Mount Hiei and took upon the practice of meditation and contemplation. And he did this for 20 years. But he found that his instinctive and emotional forces rose in him, that he could not separate himself from his thoughts. He found a depth of passion constantly permeating his thought, speech, and action. How can I, he asked himself internally, how can I be a celibate if I'm attracted to the other sex? How is it that I still become angry when someone admonishes me? These are a few of the questions that he's raised himself. He said, you know what? I cannot detach myself from myself. Hence, after 20 years, he left Mount Hiei and he found refuge in Rokkakudo, the hexagonal temple, which still is in its location in Kyoto. It's still as it was. I had the chance of visiting that temple many years ago, and unfortunately, it wasn't really that well looked after. The pigeons had kind of made their home there, and it appeared to be somewhat unkempt. But it was a very, very important temple in that this is where Shinran, after departing Hiezan, sat there for 100 days. And on the 95th day, it is said that he received a dream, a message from Prince Shotoku, the founder of Buddhism in Japan, as they say. And there, the message was, go and see Honen, and there he will give you the guidance that's necessary. Honen, he focused greatly on hearing the name of the Buddha, the Namo Amida Butsu. And this is where I'd like to kind of take off and concentrate on my discussion or my talk this morning. In the Tanisho, it stated, deep hearing leads to a twofold awakening, appreciating the boundless compassion of Amida and simultaneously seeing into the bottomless depth of blind passion. So what is this deep hearing? I mean, hearing is something that we hear through our auditory sensation, our ears. And you know, some people have said, well, it goes in one ear and out the other ear. And unless there's a very, very conscious effect to remember what's been said, to listen and to hear, it does go out one ear and out the other. And I'm quite familiar with that because Itoko will say to me, Roy, did you do this? Well, it's gone out one ear and it just doesn't remain with me. I've forgotten. And so I think this is where the discrimination is made, where one is auditory hearing and the other one is deep hearing. Now, some will say that it's an experiential awakening of the total self, conscious and unconscious, mind and body. That's deep hearing. But in a practical sense, what does it really mean? Well, some of you may have entered a dark, cavernous place, a cave. There is no light whatsoever, it's total darkness. But it's when somebody turns on the light that we see the surrounding in the cave. In the same manner, it's that light, the Amida's call, that voice that we've heard, deep hearing, that is in our heart and mind. Our heart and mind is dark. But once the calling voice, the light embraces us, it enlightens the place. It enlightens our heart. And we find that we are full of passion. We have our desires. Our ego is very strong. And so under those conditions, how can we reach the state of enlightenment? It's darkness until the light comes. And as a metaphor, the voice that we hear, that deep calling voice, as it enters our heart and mind, we begin to see actually who we really are. Now, let me give you an example. And this is an actual case of what happened. And sometimes, like in many of the texts, you find that there are many metaphors, which are very, very practical experiences by someone that really kind of gives us an appreciation of what the message is. And the person I'd like to make reference to is, it's not a story, but it's an actual occurrence by a fisherman by the name of Mr. Ryotaro Nakagama. He was a friend of my father. In fact, they kind of grew up together. They were born maybe within a year of each other. They grew up in this small little town called Kominato in southern Kagoshima. And they both came to Canada, I think in their perhaps late teens, about 17 or 18. Anyway, that's when my father came to Canada. And I'm assuming that Mr. Nakagama came around the same time. In their livelihood as a child in Kominato, they attended this Jodo Shinshu temple. It's still there today. It's old. It's maybe 400 years old. They attended this temple. And my father clearly remembers Mr. Nakagama, his grandmother taking him almost on a regular basis to this temple. Well, Mr. Nakagama came here and he married a person of Christian faith. And so he lived and he carried on his life. One day he was out fishing in October, out towards Point Grey, which is not too far from the mouth of the Fraser River. Whereupon in the early part of October, with the fall winds and the rising tide, he came into the river of the Fraser River, the mouth of the Fraser River. And it's called a drop-off. And the reason for the name drop-off is because the bottom of the river suddenly drops into the ocean, which is the mouth of the Fraser River. The Fraser River just ends at that point. And so it's almost like a cliff. It drops off several meters. But the fishermen are very, very clever. They know that that's the time when the tide is coming in, and with the westerly wind of, let's say, 30 to 40 kilometers, the fish are coming up as well. And so they take the chance and they put their net out and they catch the fish. Well, Mr. Nakagama did that. But this time, the gale force winds and the waves, approximately 4 to 5 meters, took his boat. And the boat went on its side. Fortunately, the boat refloated. And this is when it was interesting. And this is how he was told by Mr. Nakagama to my father. And in fact, what happened was he told the story to my father. My father said to me, Roy, come on in, listen to the story because it's interesting. And so I went in there. I was around 16 or 17. I went in. I sat dutifully and listened to Mr. Nakagama tell this story. He said, when the boat flipped over on its side, the words Namo Amida Butsu came forth. He said it was so spontaneous. It just came out. And so the boat was on its regular form and he came in. So, he said to my father, why is it that I am married into a Christian family and you don't think that I've voiced the words Namo Amida Butsu ever since I've been married? And so he said, why is it that? And so my father said, remember you went to the church or the temple with your grandmother, and I'm sure that on a regular basis, you must have repeated that Onenbutsu. And he said, undoubtedly, the words entered your heart and your mind. It became what we call deep hearing. It wasn't a matter of your ears just hearing the words, but it entered yourself. That's how my father explained it to him. And so Mr. Nakagama said, well, it's interesting you say that. Because, when I repeated the word Namo Amitabha, he said, I wasn't seeking to be saved. I wasn't asking God to save me. It was a gesture of gratefulness. Here I am, able to live this long and to go fishing and enjoy my life and to be embraced by the Buddha. And this is where the contradiction or the difficulty has come into his life. I don't know whether when on his passing, whether he was, his funeral was a Buddhist or Christian one, but I'm sure it must have been a Christian service. And so Mr. Nakagama, to me, in some ways, is an example of where the hearing of the voice has really entered him. It's not just mere set of words. I spoke at a gathering of seniors at the Vancouver Temple. It must have been around 2002 or 3 when I was asked to help there. And it was on a Thursday afternoon, and a group of senior citizens, mostly women, had gathered, and they asked me to say a few words. So I related the story. And the ladies, in 100% response, the word they used was, Hontoni kawaiso. I feel sorry for Mr. Nakagama because of the conflict that he must have had deep in his heart. Here he was, a Buddhist, and yet in everyday life, he was a Christian. And they said this conflict must have been very, very hurtful for him, especially as his years of life became to an end. And so, to me, that is an example of what this deep hearing is about. I can give you another example of a person who grew up in Calgary. Is there a place called Fort Bragg, is it? Just south of Calgary? There's a place that's not too far away. I think this is where, what's her name, still lives? Susan lives. What's that called? Fort? Bragg Creek, that's right. Bragg Creek, that's right. There's a person by the name of Brenda Zhao, and maybe some of you have heard this story. But Brenda Zhao grew up in Bragg Creek and attended the Calgary Buddhist Temple. I don't know how often. And he began to understand the Buddhist teaching and appreciated the words of Reverend Kyojo Ikuza. The story is that she left Bragg Creek in her late teens, early 20s, and lived in Vancouver, in Chinatown, and befriended and married a Chinese person. There was a disconnect in terms of not attending a Buddhist temple of any sort. Anyway, she had cancer in her life, later in her life, and she was treated at the Vancouver Cancer Clinic. As I was helping in the Vancouver temple, the secretary of the temple received a call from the daughter of this Brenda Zhao. And the daughter said, we'd like to speak to someone, explain to us about Buddhism. And so the secretary referred the call to me, and I responded, and I called her back. And I said, could I help you? And she said, yes, if you could. And I said, okay, well, let's meet at the this little meeting area at the cancer clinic, whereby I set up an appointment. And the situation was that the children, 3, 4 of them, knew that the mother was going to go at any time. And so the elder daughter, the oldest one, said, Mr. Quinn, my mother, has not written, but has voiced very strongly that she would like to have a Buddhist funeral on her passing. And so the daughter said, well, I don't know too much about Buddhism. And the youngest one, his name was Joy. I remember very well. Joy, the youngest one, is saying, well, Mom, you know what? I mean, Brenda, our mother, she hasn't left anything as a record. So how do you know that we should have a Buddhist funeral on her passing? Well, the sister said, well, Mom has mentioned it several times. So Roy Acuña is here to explain to us what Buddhism is. And so I spent about an hour and a half explaining Buddhism. And Joy kept saying, you know what, Roy, I still don't think that that's the funeral that we should have. I said, well, it's entirely up to you. It's entirely up to you. And so I left. And I can remember I was sitting in my brother's dental office, getting my teeth worked on. And a phone call comes and says, Roy, I'd like you to come and conduct a very brief pillow-side service for my mom. I said, oh, well, I can't go now because I'm sitting in the dental chair. But shortly thereafter, I'll come by and visit you at the hospital. And whereupon I did. Unfortunately, you know, I guess what it was, you had these I don't know what it is, forethought. I had my full and all of the things in a bag in my car. And I guess I thought maybe this is going to happen. So it was in the car. Fortunately, these things just unconsciously happens. And so I came to the hospital and the 4 children were there. They waited for me. And I said, oh, you've decided to have a Buddhist funeral and Buddhist departing for your mom. And the eldest daughter said, yes. And Joy says, yes, I have finally decided that we would have a Buddhist departing for my mother. And so I said, could you take me to where your mother is? And she was lying in the bed and her vision had gone by then, but her auditory sensation was still there. And so I can sense that. I said, Mrs. Zhao, this is Roy Acuña, and I held her hand, and you can sense that she was hearing my words. And so Joy, I looked at Joy, and I really felt sorry for him because I felt that there was conflict. And he wanted to have the proper sending for his mother. So I said, Joy, would you sit right next to your mom's head, the forehead there? Just sit there. I said, you know what? Why don't you hold your mom's hand? Just grasp your mom's hand. And so what I did was I chanted the Jusege, the more brief one, because I didn't want to spend too much time with the family, with their agony. So I said, Joy, hold her hand. And I chanted the Jusege. And I watched his hand. And it was amazing because the grip that was tight became softer and softer. And there was a warm, I just sensed there was a warmness. And so after the chanting, I said, thank you, and so forth. And I said, Joy, how did you feel when the chanting was done? And he said, you know, Roy, it was interesting because the grasp that I had and my mother had was very tight. But as the chanting went on, the grip became less and less, softer and softer. And so I said, how do you feel, Joy? And he says, you know, I really feel great. I think that my mother now is really going to be received and would be happy with the final outcome. And so about 3 days later, I received a call from the family saying that she had passed away. And a funeral was held at the Vancouver Temple. And again, I think it's an example of this deep hearing by Mrs. Zhao. In her early years, she heard the Namo Amida Butsu. First of all, perhaps consciously, and became very unconscious. And her response was very, very unconscious as well. It was what we call perhaps an involuntary response. And so this remained with her until the final days of her life. And so those are the examples that I have that give me the feeling of what we mean by deep hearing. And I think this is the essence of the hearing, the calling voice of the Buddha. And with those words, what I'd like to do is to conclude my talk with a reading from the Tanisho again. And if we could please put our hands together. And this is on page 46 of the Tanisho. Fundamentally, the sacred name is a self-articulation of basic reality, expressing itself in language that makes it accessible to anyone who has the ability to hear deeply. Since the sacred name is neither concept to be understood nor a proposition to be figured out, anyone at any time, under any circumstance, can call on the name. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my awkwardness and my understanding of the Tanisho and the calling voice of the Buddha. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy Sensei, for the wonderful Dharma talk and also sharing with us your personal experiences. I'd like to close this morning's service with the recitation of the Nembutsu. So if I could ask you, please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. This will conclude this morning's service. Just to let you know, next week is our July Shotsuki monthly memorial service. Then the following week on July 9th at 2 p.m., there will be the Obon service at the Fraser Valley Buddhist Temple out in Abbotsford. And on the 10th, the Vancouver Buddhist Temple will be having their Obon service from 2 p.m. again. We will be having a regular service at 10 o'clock here at our temple and also on Zoom. And then the following weekend, July 16th is a Saturday. Saturday morning at 10:30, we will have our Obon no Kotsudo service, our columbarium, where we keep ashes of some of our members. We'll have a service at 10:30. And then we have the Bon Odori, the dancing from 4 o'clock out in our parking lot. The vendors will begin selling food from 3 p.m. And then on the 17th, the Sunday at 10 a.m., we will have a joint English and Japanese Obon service. And it'll be, our guest minister will be Reverend Aoki from the Vancouver Buddhist Temple. And then in August, from August 11th to 14th, we have the Vancouver Island Obon Cemetery visitation tour. There are still a limited number of seats available. If anybody's interested, please contact me. We've got everything all set up now, and it looks like it will be a wonderful trip all around the island. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy today, the beautiful weather outside. So please go and enjoy the weather. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. If you want to unmute yourself, you can.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank
Bye.
you, Sensei. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Roy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Cincy.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
Dad, I'm gonna call you.